Hi guys, I hope this video finds you all well. We are continuing our look at the Thomas Carter trial, and hopefully you started figuring out the facts of the case, assigning kind of facts that are helpful to the prosecution, facts that are helpful to the defense. So you're almost kind of going over with yourself what we would see in the courtroom as um, the witnesses presenting their testimony. Okay, as far as examination and cross-examination, and then obviously a little bit of a closing statement as well. Now, after the closing statement, guys, you have the judge speak, and the judge will give their jury instructions. And so this is also known as charging the jury. And so that basically says, hey, jury, these are your responsibilities. These are things you need to keep in mind as you go in and deliberate in the jury room. And so basically, guys, the main purpose of the jury instructions is to make sure that the jurors understand the law. So they're explaining the law to the jurors as um, easily as possible, as clear as clearly as possible. And so part of that is they discuss the elements of the case, basically the elements that have to be proven, that the prosecution had to prove for a guilty verdict to be rendered. Okay, and so real quick, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go over what your typical juror instructions would look like, because for your second assignment for this week, guys, you are going to be acting as the juror. Obviously, you're not going to have to come to a unanimous decision, but you are going to be rendering a verdict. Okay, so um, part of the juror's instructions, guys, usually talks, like I said, about kind of the duties of a juror. And one of the big parts of that is this idea that all of your decisions must be made based solely off of the evidence, not just with the evidence, solely off of the evidence. It can't be um, partially evidence, partially sentiment. Oh, this poor person, they had this and this and this go wrong for them. They seem like such a nice person. Um, Not off of emotions or anything like that. And so uh, none of that can play a factor. You have to do your best to push all of that to the side and just solely focus on the evidence. And as far as the evidence goes, if the evidence ends up being equal, basically, in your mind, you have to side with the defense. Okay. And then also you have the credibility of witnesses that you have to factor in as well when you're making a decision. And so they'll talk about uh, you need to be focusing on the credibility of the witness as far as what you deem to be credible and not credible. And it shouldn't be based off of, well, this person said this, but this person said this. I can't trust anyone. You have to make the determination, okay, their story is more believable. They came off as more believable. If you do have a difference where they're talking about the same event, same situation, but you have two different um, testimonies that are described by two different witnesses, you have to decide which witness comes off as being more believable. Okay. And then also, guys, they'll typically talk about objections, and they will reemphasize, hey, if something was objected to and it was sustained by myself, the judge, that means you cannot take that into account at all. You can't speculate, oh, why did that person, why did the attorney object? Were they trying to hide? Whatever. Um, you can't speculate. What would the witness have said had they not objected? You just have to take all that and push it to the side. And then finally, guys, you have obviously the big one, the big concept that we've talked about already, which is this idea of one, burden of proof. So with burden of proof, remember guys, the burden of proof is on the prosecution, is on the state for a criminal trial. Okay, and so that means that they have to have such a good case, such a strong case that there is no real logical way for you to question this person's guilt. Right? They have to prove that that person is guilty. Remember, all the defense has to do is show that there is enough reasonable doubt. Right? So the burden of proof falls on the prosecution, and we have that measure, right? That burden of proof squarely on the prosecution because in this country, and this is part of the instructions typically as well, is usually the judge will say, in this country, we presume people to be innocent until proven guilty. All right, and so we have to maintain that, and that's why the burden of proof falls on the state or falls on the prosecution. Sometimes we'll call prosecution, we call it the people, however you want to phrase it. And so that, guys, is kind of a breakdown of what you would get for a juror's instructions. Obviously, it'll be specific to the case. I will, for your assignment, give you the juror instructions specific for the Thomas Carter case, but that is kind of a breakdown of overall, these are the expectations, these are the responsibilities of every juror in a criminal trial. All right, guys, have a great one, and I will talk to you soon.